how did we end up in a position where the health advice or our understanding of how food is affecting our bodies and our health, how did that become so divorced from the reality over the past 40 years?
Right. Well, it started really in the 60s and 70s, the obsession with cholesterol. And everyone wanted to know after Ike, the president, had a heart attack and all that stuff. And everyone was interested in why are there so many heart attacks? And there were none, excuse me, at the turn of the century, really, at all. Now, one of the big reasons was smoking had exploded, but they didn't realize that at the time. So they went looking and they found that cholesterol, blood cholesterol, loosely correlated, correlation, not causation, but it kind of correlated. The higher cholesterol seemed to link to a higher rate of heart disease. So they took that misleading lead and they ran with it. And then a guy called Ansel Keys was extremely political, extremely aggressive. He was actually a fish physiologist, but he was a very clever guy. The K rations in the army came from Ansel Keys. So he did some stuff that was kind of useful, but he became obsessed with cholesterol. He also saw the political opportunity and the financial opportunity in heart disease, the biggest killer, and all the interest in it. So he got into it and he ran straight with cholesterol. And he did a couple of studies. I won't go into details, the 6 countries and 7 countries, and they were utter junk, just correlational, associational studies, total junk. But he biased them. So what he did was out of 22 countries where the data was available, they had the cholesterol and they had the rate of heart disease. Ansel went in and he picked the 6 countries and then the 7 countries that he knew the cholesterol correlated to heart disease best. So he could get this straight line relationship, higher cholesterol, higher heart disease. And it was nonsense because when you took all the 22 countries, it was a shotgun plot. There was no correlation. And we know now for the last 10 or 20 years, it was junk. The correlation barely exists. So that's kind of where it came from. He was very political, as I say, very influential. He got consensus. He joined the American Heart Association. He became very powerful. He got in Time magazine in the 60s. And basically, this nonsense idea took hold. And to make a long story short, then, there was a consensus panel with the National Institutes of Health in around 1981. And the whole industry and business realized there were a lot of scientists saying this is junk science. So it became a bit embarrassing. So they came together and they created a consensus that cholesterol is the main driver of heart disease. And after that, the rest is history. So whenever you see a consensus has to be forced, people have to be, or dissonant people have to be shut down or censored or ridiculed, you know it's a scam. You know it's groupthink, you know it's a scam. So cholesterol, fat is bad for you, all the COVID stuff, a lot of the climate stuff. Whenever there's a forced consensus done, you know there's something rotten at the core.
Yeah.
And, you know, long story short, it just became the mantra. They forced the consensus. Anyone who went against it then lost their funding, got in trouble, and people gave up. And then the industry, the statin industry came in the 80s and 90s, and they were making the biggest selling drugs of all time on the back of the cholesterol nonsense. And after that, the fate was sealed. It was too big to fail. And it still to this day is too big to fail. I mean, literally too big to fail. They just cannot allow that one to go down, unfortunately.
So we'll get to that too big to fail actually in a minute because I'm really interested in that. But like, is there any causal link that has been drawn between cholesterol and heart disease?
Your cholesterol, actually, the lipoproteins, low density lipoprotein, sounds like a big word. That's LDL. That's your bad cholesterol. And it's actually billions and trillions of lipoproteins that carry cholesterol, and then they also carry fats, triglycerides for energy around your body. So think of billions of submarines made by your liver that are sent out to bring the cholesterol around your body because it's a crucial molecule for life. And it also brings around fats. LDL, low density lipoprotein, and HDL, high density lipoprotein. That's the good cholesterol, the HDL good cholesterol. but it's not cholesterol molecules. They're lipoproteins, and they're like submarines because your blood is aqueous, it's water-based, and the fats your body must ship around, and cholesterol is a fatty molecule, they won't go through your blood because it's water-based. You know, it'll be like oil and water. So your body makes these exotic macromolecules to store the cholesterol and fat and deliver the fat for energy and deliver the cholesterol for all its crucial functions. Beautiful system. If you damage those particles, and you can do it by eating sugar or getting overweight or diabetic, getting inflamed, you damage the cholesterol particles and then they become a problem. But you'll note what I said. When you damage the particles, they become a problem. They become smaller, denser, they get oxidized, they're a problem. But it's what damages them that's the root cause that you need to address, not the particles themselves. They're natural. Your liver makes 80% of your cholesterol. Even if you eat less,
wow,
your liver will make more. Your body,
really?
all bodies, are making mountains of cholesterol all the time. So how could it be bad? It's ridiculous. But if you damage the particles, then you create a problem. But it's not the particles' problem. It's the fact that you damage them.
Okay. So then, before we go to the how you damage them, like what exactly is cholesterol doing in the body? Like, what are its main functions for people who don't know, and for myself?
Cholesterol is arguably or almost certainly the most important molecule for life, for mammalian life, and plants have stanol, plant cholesterol. It's the most important molecule for them. No cholesterol, no life. So people need to get that in their heads. No cholesterol, no life. There is no more important molecule for human life and health than cholesterol. So your brain has around 4% of your body weight is in your brain, but it has 20% of your body's cholesterol. Your brain is stuffed with cholesterol. Cholesterol makes all the cell membranes for your 37 trillion or 37,000 billion cells that make up a human. Every single one of those has crucial cholesterol creating the membrane around the cell, without which you're gone. Cholesterol is central to life. It makes your hormones. It's used as a precursor for vitamin D, which people will be aware is really important. I mean, you could go on and on, synapses and all kinds of, it's just crucial and central to mammals' lives. That's it.
It's only crucial to life.
Yeah. Crucial.
Yeah. So then what is it that can damage the cholesterol molecules themselves that then cause them to become like denser and oxidized and become the problems you were talking about?
Right. Well, if you're going to pick the biggest thing, like I'm an engineer, so I use the Pareto principle. What's is 20% of things that cause 80% of the problem, that idea? What's the big hitters, the elephants in the room? So I always say the devil's triad. Three things that together in the cluster are the worst possible thing you can do to your body. And the devil's triad is sugars, refined grains or refined wheats, which is in all our food, obviously, and all our breads, and vegetable oils, which are seed oils made in chemical factories, basically. They're oils that are extracted from seeds with hexane and solvents and high temperature. They should never go in any human body, but we're told are heart healthy. So sugar, refined grains, and vegetable oils. And the problem is that most of ultra-processed foods and most of the supermarket is stuffed with that devil's triad. The British Medical Journal a few years ago came out, over 60% of all calories consumed in the UK came from ultra-processed food, which is the devil's triad.
60%?
So, yeah. So we're not just eating a certain amount of what's essentially poisonous to us, the devil's triad. You could argue that the majority of our calories in our population are now being eaten. So imagine you had a substance that you got to be careful with because it causes inflammation in the body and it's a problem. And imagine you said, well, I'm going to make you eat half of your calories is going to be that stuff. Whatever about a spoonful, whatever about like 10%, you might walk it off. No, half of what people are putting in their mouths now is essentially a form of toxin. So there's no surprises why we have an explosion, a tsunami of chronic disease. And the mechanism, sugar, refined grains, vegetable oils drive insulin resistance, which is high blood glucose and high blood insulin from your pancreas. It is type 2 diabetes, but most people who have type 2 diabetes are not diagnosed. For every type 2 diabetic diagnosed, there's another 4 or 5 people walking around who are type 2 diabetic, not diagnosed. So it's an enormous problem. Type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, they call it pre-diabetes sometimes. Surveys in America 6 years ago, 64% of Americans over 45 are now essentially type 2 diabetic. That's 2/3 of Americans over 45-year-olds are effectively type 2 diabetic, even if they don't have the diagnosis. And if you measure their blood insulin, like myself and Dr. Gerber and my network always do, it's probably more like 75% of Americans over 45 now have the insulin resistance diabetic problem. And that will make an utter mess of your cholesterol particles.
Hey everyone, thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe, because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.